more. It's good to see all of you out there. This is Boomer Life Lessons and Stories, and I'm Ron. I'm glad you're with me today. We're going to talk about beating Dave Ramsey to the punch. I have a lot of respect for that gentleman. He has some very keen insights, and he's helped a lot of people. But before we go there, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends about my channel. If this is useful information to you and entertaining for you, please share it, and it'll help me overcome the difficulties that are presented to this channel by the YouTube algorithm. I want to make sure that I'm able to continue doing this because I certainly enjoy sharing elements of my life story, and the things that I've experienced. And again, I hope it's been very helpful to you. For those of you that have been with me for the first 9 episodes, it's hard to believe this is episode number 10. Okay, so let's talk about beating Dave Ramsey to the punch. My grandfather did. Now, who was my grandfather? He was a man who was born in 1905, Bryant Elijah Summit. He was born in the hills of Arkansas. He was too young to go and fight in World War I, but he did bear the full brunt of the Depression with the family. And he came out of that with a certain perspective. Here's the gentleman that in talking to him, I love to hear the stories about when he was growing up. I'd say, Grandpa, how was it when you were going through the Depression? Was it difficult? And he would say things, because he was a farmer. Oftentimes he was a sharecropper. He farmed other people's property. And he paid his rent by his crop, right? So when I asked him the question, did he find it difficult going through the Depression? He said, no, we heard the city folks had it pretty bad, the soup lines and finding places to live and no work. But he goes, we always had food on the table. He goes, we might have had cornbread a time or two for breakfast, but we always had food on the table, and we really never wanted for anything. Now, one of the key things that you need to realize is they were almost self-sufficient, almost. He said they'd have to spend a few dollars every now and then on sugar and flour and things like that they couldn't grow on the farm. But this is the type of individual that we're talking about, and who was talking to me basically my preteen years. Every chance I got, I'd want to go spend time. My brother and I would want to go spend time with my grandfather. Something else you might find a little interesting. I do have a twin. Yes. There's another one of me walking out there somewhere. You might have seen him. And my grandfather was a twin. His twin brother was Steely Elisha Summit. 2 wonderful, wonderful men who endured hardship, but took care of the family. So I said all that to kind of prep what he told me that caused me to realize he beat Dave Ramsey to the punch. So as always, my brother and I were out walking with him or helping him with chores or whatever it might have been. He gathered us together and he said, boys, I want you to remember something, and please try to do this. He said, pay cash for everything. Who does that sound like? For those of you familiar with Dave Ramsey, that's Dave Ramsey all over again, right? But the thing is, my grandfather told us this back in the 60s, right? He told us in the 60s to pay cash for everything. Why? He didn't want us to become slaves to the lender. He knew that that would not end well ultimately. And I've thought about that. And I'm going to confess to you, okay? This is confession time. In the 1980s, Now, I graduated with my undergraduate in 79. In the 1980s, my wife and I, we played keeping up with the Joneses. Whatever the Joneses bought, we had to buy, right? Oh, and by the way, I like to buy property too. I buy property, right? So we had mortgages, we had credit cards, we had all those things. We had the best that life could afford. But you know, the thing is, we really couldn't afford them. One day, and again, this was in the 1980s, we woke up and we were $14,000 in debt in credit cards. How did that happen? We saw something we wanted, we bought it. We could buy it with future dollars. We didn't have to worry about current dollars because the current dollars were going to pay for our current bills, right? How wrong was that? It was very wrong because it made us slaves to the lender. Our future work was already bought and spoken for by the lenders. And you know, I remember my grandfather telling me this, and we worked and we got the bills paid off. We paid the bills off. We worked to pay off all the cars, and now we try to pay cash for everything. Yeah, you know, I I bought a house. I bought another house. I got a few houses, you know, and I'm not so worried about being slave to the lender because I worked very hard to do the things that my grandfather told me that has turned Dave Ramsey into a multimillionaire. And by the way, Dave, if you ever see this video, I don't begrudge you that one bit. You've helped a tremendous number of people by the programs that you brought to them and your radio talk show and your YouTube videos. I certainly appreciate the mission that you've taken on to help people get out of debt and stay out of debt. Because you see, if you think that you want something, but you really can't afford to pay cash for it, but you can say, oh, it fits in my monthly budget, I can afford it by paying for it with a credit card. The thing that you're not realizing, perhaps, I'm just saying, it's one perspective. I had a friend who's on one of the boards that I serve on. His daughter he was telling his daughter something that she didn't quite agree with. And she said, OMP. And I said, well, what is OMP? She meant one man's opinion. Or is that OM? Oh, I think it was OMP, one man's opinion. So maybe she made a contraction out of it. The point I'm trying to make is simply, yeah, I have some opinions. You know, if you meet an engineer, we have more than one opinion oftentimes, right? But here's the thing. What we don't realize is when we get into debt, we might be able to meet our monthly obligations, but we're taking on more debt at the risk of not being able to handle an emergency. And that's true. Dave Ramsey talks about one of the first things that you should do is to establish an emergency fund, even if it's just $1,000. And sometimes $1,000 is beyond the reach of a lot of people because every penny they earn is going to pay their debts, the roof over their head, the meals that their children and their family eat, you know, the upkeep and maintenance of a car, gas in the car, insurance, on and on and on and on it goes. And we hadn't even gotten to credit card debt. So as you get greater into debt and you're getting more and more credit cards, and some people keep score, they say debt's a good thing. Well, be careful. It can be leveraged and used and benefit you if you use it properly. But more often in times than not, it doesn't end well for people who have lots of credit cards. You'll build up debt that amounts to thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. So obviously, when you create an obligation, you have to live up to that obligation. That is the right and ethical thing to do. But if you don't take account to what your current state is, your real, true current state, how much money you earn versus how much money is going out the door, and how much money you're saving and investing. If you've got more going out the door than you got coming in, there's no way that that's going to end well, especially if you get into a situation where there's a crisis or emergency that takes money to fix. So I guess my grandfather was right, and he had to live through it in terms of the depression, the hard times, to really make sense of that for me. He's a brilliant man. Here's another thing. He didn't finish high school, but he was one of the smartest men that I've known. Life lessons. He learned a lot of them, and I love him dearly, still do. He's gone on to be with the Lord right now. But he and my Uncle Steely, his twin brother, my memories of them and the time I spent with them and the lessons my brother and I learned from them will stay with me the rest of my life. And it's already been with me for most of my life. And again, as I said in a previous video, I'm soon to be 64. I hope you have people like that in your life that are willing to share their lessons with you, their wisdom with you, so that you can avoid some of the hardship that they had to endure. So with that, my apologies to Dave Ramsey, but somebody did beat him to the punch, and that was my grandpa. All the best. Take care and be careful out there.